The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself. Carl Sagan.
Welcome to the Lessons from Nature podcast, modeling the secrets of the bees. Hosted by Mark Rubin.
If you can hear my voice, you're alive. And if you're alive, you must be adaptable to many variables, including competition for energy. Biological adaptability is the key to survival. If you ate food today, some other organism on this planet didn't eat that food, and you won the game of survival of the fittest. Congratulations. Today on the Lessons from Nature podcast, we'll be discussing Secret 6 from Honey is Money. We are not playing alone, and it's about competitive ecology. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Hannah Mather. Hannah is a biologist with a deep connection to all living things. She's a bee influencer on Instagram at Hannah's Honeycomb. She takes amazing pictures of plants and animals and insects and birds and other living things and provides insightful comments along with cool music. Hannah will co-host 4 episodes with me where we will discuss the biological secrets of the bees through the lens of the human business of making money and the bee business of making honey. These episodes discuss the way that people and bees adapt to variability, competition, seasonality, and work. Welcome, Hannah. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Hannah, I'm going to start this with a little story. And the story is how you won the competition for being the biologist to co-host these 4 episodes with me. Why are you here? So basically, who knows? I don't know. I'm going to tell you. I was looking for a biologist to co-host the biology series with me. And I went on social media. And when I was looking for a biologist, what's important to me is finding people that are aligned with my philosophy, that we're all part of nature, because the world I imagine is a world where people live in harmony with the rest of nature. And there's different kinds of biologists. There are biologists that focus on the science of biology. And there are also biologists that focus on specific areas of biology that are of interest to them. And when I saw what you post on Instagram, which comes through as a pure love of nature and all living things, and the excitement you have with sharing what is special to you, both in terms of the organisms that you take pictures of and talk about, I thought Hannah is the perfect person to be the biologist.
Thank you. It means a lot to know that my work comes through how I mean it to.
Good. I'm going to talk about a summary of the previous episode where we discussed that energy in a habitat is variable due to many conditions. And the organisms that can adapt to this variability the best win the game of competition. The organisms that can adapt to that variability win, and they're able to reproduce and send their DNA into the future. So what I'm going to do, Hannah, is talk about a few different ways that organisms adapt, and then explain those ways through the lens of business, and then have you chime in about your ideas about how the bees are doing this in terms of the business of making honey. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. I'm going to just read a summary first of the different things that we're going to discuss today on this episode. The first is market dynamics, and then seasonal variations, adaptability to change, competitive advantages and strengths, physical attributes, innovation and technology, marketing and branding, operational efficiency, human capital or bee capital, and regulatory compliance. So we're going to kick this off with the idea of market dynamics and through the lens of competition. So the example I'm going to give here is that in a business, it's super critical to be tuned in and connected to these market dynamics which is like monitoring customer demand, monitoring competition, monitoring trends. And these things together allow a business to navigate the market effectively so that the business can react to that variability in a way that is competitive and keep the honey flowing. So given that, can you think of a few ways that honeybees have this behavior?
Sure. I would say that they definitely are in tune with the seasonality of the inflow of nectar and pollen, and then the times where, like over winter, where there's not. So they're constantly basing their population off of the amount of resources available. And the more resources that they have available, the more that they'll build up their population. And then as, the season winds down, they'll start lowering their population so that it's kind of the bare bones over the winter, so that they consume the least amount of resources that they've had saved from the rest of the year. So they have to be in tune with that, or else, you can't consume all of their resources too early in the year and not have enough to finish out, and to also maximize when those resources are the most available so that they have the biggest population to take advantage of that.
That's really interesting. And in the hive, which bee or role of bee determines the rate of production of eggs and how that relates to the future population of workers and energy consumption within the hive?
So it comes down to the queen, but what's interesting is that it's not actually just her making those decisions. It's the workers around her that will kind of guide her and communicate that as well. So it's really a communal effort where the queen is the one laying the eggs to keep up with the certain times of year. But, at certain times of year, the workers won't provide as many cells for her to lay in. So it's kind of always being a feedback of give and take, where they're all interacting with each other and all interacting with the seasonality.
An interesting parallel in my junk removal business is that the employees that are doing the work of putting the junk in the trucks get bonuses based on how much revenue they bring in per day, based on a formula. And the objective of the managers is to set up the conditions for the day so that the number of workers that are working matches the demand of revenue projected for that day, to ensure that all of the workers get a bonus that day. Because if we have too many workers working, then that lowers these percentages in the formula, and that we could create a situation where no one gets a bonus in the day. And so it's a similar idea that there's a relationship between the people doing the work, the person who's deciding how many people need to run that day, and then upstream of that, before that, how many people we need to hire in advance, because it takes like 21 days to hire an employee, which is around the same number of days it takes for an egg to hatch. Just lucky. Life is lucky. Okay. The next one is adaptability to change. It's important in a business to be adaptable, basically measuring things like customer preferences, emerging technologies, and changes. One of the things in my business is that we are charged money. It's called dumping fees, but basically we divert as much material as we can from transfer stations, because we're charged by the ton, by weight. So the more material we bring to these transfer stations for recycling, the more money it costs us. So we try to find homes for the material that we take, and we try to recycle as much as we can in ways that don't cost us money, but also cost us time. Because it takes time to move things around the planet, and there's trade-offs here. And one of the things about dumping fees is they're tied to fuel costs, because the transfer stations charge us money to dump the stuff, because they have to handle it and move it and then recycle it internally within their systems. And there's fuel surcharges. So what happens is when the cost of fuel goes up, our dumping fees go up a lot. And the equation of time and honey, the equation of, is it more advantageous to spend an extra hour to bring a refrigerator somewhere else than bring it to the transfer station and pay them to bring it somewhere else, depends a lot on the variability of fuel. prices. And so we have to react, be nimble and pay attention to local prices in fuel and how those surcharges are applied on these bills. And there's latency, meaning we don't always know until like 3 months later, and then it's too late. And so creating management systems or awareness is really hard to do for things like this.
I would say one of the ways that that could be relatable is how far they're willing to go from the hive. So if there's a source close to the hive and then another source much farther from the hive, they kind of need to decide where to put their energy, whether it's worth it to go the farther away source that might have more blooms, but they would burn more of that energy getting there and back. And then there's more risk of things happening, birds eating them, things like that. Or is it the closer one better? Which should they send more bees to? Or in some cases, split up and send some to one, some to another.
Right. It's interesting how secret 4 in Honey is Money is called Time is Honey. And really it's about the decision-making that you just said and how many decisions are made based on time and honey. And for example, we're not in the same physical part of the planet. We're talking over Zoom. You could have walked here to talk to me. You could have flown here in a helicopter. You could have ridden a horse, but you didn't, because time is honey. And this is the lowest cost way that the two of us could get together and share this information. And that's what we did. And every decision that people make factors in time, effort, and risk versus inspiration, motivation, and manipulation. We're trading these ideas based on time and honey. And the bees are doing it too, because it costs energy to move. And so we're deciding what's the optimal way to do it, given all things. And here we are, we're talking. But don't worry, Anna, you will be powered by this jar of honey that's coming your way in 2 months, and that'll offset all the energy of these discussions. So I got you covered. Okay.
Wait.
Next, competitive advantages in business. People focus a lot on these advantages and strengths and stuff that would be an advantage in business. And in the junk removal business that I'm in, we have many competitive advantages. And I'll just try to do an experiment with you. How many junk removal companies do you think that you've heard of in your life that you've maybe seen, like in your just around trucks, these trucks that have like signs that say we take away your junk?
Probably more than 3, but I don't remember them.
Right. Now, do you know any phone numbers for the 3 that you don't remember?
There's a 1-800-GOT-JUNK or junk. I don't know. Maybe I
It worked because that's the one I own. And the point is that is a competitive advantage. This was not planned. To all the people watching this, this is an experiment that would have been edited out if it didn't work, but it worked. So here we are. Okay. And the idea is that by creating a company name where the name is the phone number, imprints the phone number on people's minds. So when people think, oh, I got to get rid of this old sofa, they'll call the first one they remember. And it is the biggest brand in the industry because of that. And that's a competitive advantage. It's called I call that the impossible to forget maneuver. Okay, which means if you can create a piece of information in someone's mind that they can't forget, they won't. And that is a competitive advantage. So in the honeybee world,
yes, there's quite a few competitive advantages that honeybees have over some other species. One is their population size is larger than most other colonies. And in that means they're able to gather more resources. But the reason why they're able to have such a big colony is because they are also really good at learning. They learn from each other. They optimize their foraging and all of their skill sets. They have different roles divided up. It's not just a huge colony all doing the same thing. That wouldn't be as efficient. And then they're also, with that learning, they're also generalist species, which mean that they can rely on a number of different flowers they can collect pollen and nectar from, which gives them the advantage of full season foraging. They can start foraging early in spring when those first type of flowers emerge, all the way through fall when the last of them do. while as some other species are very specialized. And since if they can only forage on certain flowers, their lifespan and the amount of time that they have, their window is much shorter. And so then they're a lot more vulnerable to climate fluctuations. So those kind of just all go together. The bigger population allows more gathering, but the learning and generalist nature of them allow those populations. So it's kind of all together.
It makes a ton of sense. So basically, the more specialized a bee is to a specific energy source, a specific type of flower, or a specific habitat in any way, the more susceptible they are to variability in the habitat that is changing in their habitat. And honeybees are successful because they're generalists in a lot of ways. Are there any physical attributes of honeybees that enable them to be more adaptable to the variability in the flowers? Like, do they have any special parts or pieces?
Well, their proboscis does allow that, which is their tongue-like feature that they use to collect nectar, is a pretty medium length on the scale of bees size proboscis. So that kind of lets them feed on some smaller flowers as well as more tubular flowers. But there are some that they can't forage on because their proboscis is still too short, but that kind of goes back with their learning. And some of them have learned to open the flowers from other angles to still be able to reach that nectar. So even though their body may not have adapted, they adapt themselves.
So they themselves, honeybees, have learned to use either tools, like the tool being their body, but basically instead of relying on a specific energy source, a flower, basically you're saying they can adapt the flower by modifying the flower to extract the energy from the flower more directly.
Yes. And I did remember one more, probably their biggest competitive advantage is the fact that they are well studied and they have beekeepers to intervene when climate fluctuations and things like that come in. That's probably their biggest competitive advantage, realistically, is that they have help.
They have help. Now that is an exact relation to, I think, what's really important about business, which is about training. There's only a certain amount of money that each individual role can support in a business, and people outgrow the roles that are available if they're not developing themselves. And in the same way that beekeepers are helping bees survive by intervening in different ways, either adding capacity in the hive or treating them for maybe, parasites or other things, or feeding them pollen or sugar water. It's super important in a business to create systems that develop people so that they can be engaged and learning so that they can continue to grow within the business system. So that's a really super important parallel. In business, a competitive advantage is being ahead of the curve on innovation, which is coming up with new either technologies, processes, procedures, communications to create an advantage through technology or through sort of structural optimizations. And I know that honeybees create honeycomb to store eggs and pollen and sugar and bees.
Well, because they're able to make it so big, they can kind of expand. They don't limit their size to a certain. They will build their nest based on space versus just population as well. So they make much bigger nests. They're able to store more. Their comb design is optimized to hold the most with the fewest amount of resources going into that, making that wax. Those cells are also the perfect size for a worker bee to emerge from as an adult. So they're the exact same size as the bee so that those bees can also reach in to clean them and feed the young. And then those young develop. And that's still the perfect size then for storing the honey in other parts of the hive.
That's really an efficiency optimization that comes through the structural design of their internal hive. And there's a line in Honey is Money, in the chapter called Stashing Honey is Storing Work, which I'll say now, which is the structure of our depot packs in our honey tight. It costs the least amount of work to stash the most amount of light. And that's what you said, is that the resources needed to create a honeycomb structure are the amount of resources. They're converting sugar into wax. You posted this recently on your Instagram.
Yeah, it's about 7 pounds of honey they have to consume to make 1 pound of wax.
And so if you're going to create a structure and you have to gather money to build your structure, and the idea is to maximize the volume of the structure so you can have the most storage capacity of the structure. I mean, whatever it is you're going to do to build your structure, the idea is to spend the least amount of work to build the structure that has the biggest volume capacity to store whatever you need to store. And they're making that decision because time is honey. And it's based on triangles, because triangles are the most efficient shape. And they end up with a honeycomb because that's a 3D version of that structural integrity. It's fascinating that nature is always optimizing. And I guess what it'll come down to is if the structure of the cells were any other shape, they either would be wasteful, meaning there would be space between. Also, as you pointed out, the points on the honeycomb, the bottom one is down and the top one is up. And they're also angled. What this does is it keeps the honey in, so the honey doesn't run out. Not only is it the optimal shape, the angles within the shape are the optimal shape to stash the honey in the most efficient way. I think that's fascinating. Next, we're going to talk about operational efficiencies. And in a business, it's important to streamline processes and optimize resources within the business system to achieve a cost savings and increase productivity of the worker. So reallocating resources within a business, both in terms of money or training, to optimize the efficiency of the operation. And can you think of how honeybees work in an organized and efficient manner within specific roles?
Yeah, so a way that they do that is through different assigned jobs that they do. So there's a lot of different roles that the worker honeybees will do in their lifetime. They'll be nurse bees caring for the young larvae that have not emerged yet. Then there'll be there's a couple other tasks such as tending to the queen, building wax, storing honey. There's some bees that's job is to take it when the foragers come in. They transfer the honey to another bee who will then put it in a cell. And there's other ones that are cleaning out the hive, cleaning out the dead bees of the hive. There's guard bees that are at the entrances to sound the alarms if anything tries to come in. And then there's the foragers that are the ones that are actually going out to collect the resources and coming back. And those jobs are assigned by age. So the youngest bees are the nurse bees, and nurse bees can't actually even fly yet. And then they'll complete some of the other jobs throughout their life and finally end as foragers. Those foragers are pretty likely to die while they're out foraging, and that saves energy for the bees that would have to clean up after them. And they've already done their other tasks. So as foragers, they're the most that are at risk of getting eaten by a bird or dying of old age and things like that. So it makes sense to send the ones that have already been able to contribute to the hive out to do the more dangerous tasks. And they've also learned the most from the other bees for following those waggle dance cues and things like that. But they will kind of adjust the roles too based on resources.
And I would like to relate that to business. The first role is a candidate, and that is like an egg that was laid. And then in the beehive, the nurse bees will cap the egg and turn into a larva. That's the same thing as securing a job interview with a person. They're not a worker yet. And then what happens is that the egg hatches and they emerge. And now you have a baby bee. That's like a new employee, brand new employee. New employee comes in, they're like, hello, first day. And we give them a little binder and we give them some paperwork to fill out. They can't do anything yet. And then the next role is there's in-office training, which is still like a nurse bee. which is that like, how does the office function and how does the paperwork flow, and how like, what are the like administrative procedures, you know, for working here, and like, how do you get time off, and how does the bonus plan work, and how does the payroll work, and setting people up for things. And then after that, they are paired with an older bee who's been there for a while, a training bee. They'll be a trainee, and then they'll be on a truck with someone who has experience, who will teach them all the waggle dances and how to talk to customers, and how to, you know, collect money, and how to safely put junk in the truck, and how to do whatever. And that is when they're a forager, because they're foraging for energy in the form of money. They're in the field. They're going out and they're going to the flowers, which are the customers, and they're gathering the energy in the form of money and bringing it back. And then there are special bees inside the hive called the office that process the energy, administrative functions. And there are managers who manage the productivity of the workers, which would be similar to the attendants to the queens in the hive that are managing the performance of things, the overall performance of things. And they're making decisions trying to optimize the flow. And similarly, in what you said about the dangers are always out in the field. And so when people are carrying 10 tons of stuff up and down stairs a day, there are injuries that occur because of slipping, because of sharp thing, who knows, whatever is going to happen. Similarly, in the bee world, you could be out in the field and get eaten by a bird, but not when you're in the hive. And so there's a trade-off of in the office work safety, which is just overhead, meaning burning through money because they're not gathering any energy, versus the workers in the field that are doing the work to gather the energy called money. But there's more danger out there. All this is baked into training and safety and retraining and trying to minimize the dangers through the waggle dances of like wear gloves. All living things are reacting to variables. The fact that you're alive means you're good at competition. Congratulations on your ability to adapt to changing conditions and outcompeting the other living things that wanted to eat the food that you already ate today. If you enjoyed this discussion about competition, please subscribe to the podcast, Lessons from Nature, Modeling the Secrets of the Bees. See you soon on the next episode, where Hannah and I will be discussing seasonality. All living things are reacting to seasonal variations in energy. We will dive into this when we talk next time about Secret 7, honeycombs and honey goes. Visit projecthoneylight.life for more information about living in harmony with the rest of nature. See you next time on Modeling the Secrets of the Bees.